What I did want to do is say, well, these are some of the tools that I use on the 3 jobs that I've been at, where the task has been, we want to write microservices and we need to bring up a server, right? And so there are a lot of different frameworks out there to do that. I've only used 2 or 3 of them. And so I was going to go through a couple of those, just as kind of an example. We'll see how that runs. And you may be familiar with them or you may not. If you have any of you ever used Cobra before? You have? Okay, so you've used that for building up command line tools. You've not. Okay, so we'll do the Cobra one. Well, but I'm gonna. So we'll do that. So my thought is that we'll try building something really simple, which is a little string server that is just going to concatenate whatever strings you hand it. But the purpose of bringing up the server, and since it's Cobra, it's going to be a command line utility, right? And we'll talk. From that perspective, and my apologies for the problems that might present anyway. But the basics should be there. So with Cobra, what we're going to do, I haven't found with Cobra the Cobra module. I don't think it really cares about modules yet. So the Cobra command is once you install it, you can do a go get. Is this screen?
You can make it a little bit bigger.
Can I make it a little bit bigger?
Yes,
and we'll see if we can. Let me try something here. System preferences, displays, scale it 20 feet. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. So let's try that. We'll make our screen. Yes?
I see that Cobra is using, or at least when I use it, it is showing up as version 0.0.3.
Oh, okay, the version you're using. And let's see, when I'm...
At least in this particular project.
Okay. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so... Make this a little bit smaller. It's going to help with this going.
That was my cleaner. Trying to watch a good thing.
Cobra, let's see. Okay, so I've installed it there in GoBin. And version. If I can spell version, of course. So it doesn't like that. One last try. I don't know. Version, didn't like that, didn't like that. I don't know what version I'm running at the moment. Okay, so let's just look at let's try to go in somewhere. What I want to do, like I said, we're going to try something really simple. Let's just build a Cobra server, and all it's going to do is support a concat command. And the idea is this will be a command line tool, and we'll be able to actually run. We'll be able to run it, and we're going to fix it so that we can just give it a set of strings on the command line, and it'll just spit out the concatenation rows. So that's the first goal. Okay. So the Cobra tool is, after you've got it there, the command to run it is here. First, you do a Cobra. Should be a Cobra init. Let me give it a shot here. I did Cobra. I don't recall how to do that. I called this one EXSTR originally for strings, so we're going to try to go. Okay, and we'll just start here as good as CD generated servers. Okay, so we're going to try doing our command over here, and if I've got this correct, which it looks suspicious to me, Cobra init, and we'll just call this strings. Okay, and now the thing is that it put this in my Go path, and this is my Go path right here, and the root of the Go path, which I find is a little bit odd. It didn't generate it in place. So I'm going to go ahead and move it from there. We'll go there and take a look at it first, though. CD $Go path, and there's our source. There's our strings application that we just built on Cobra one. So we'll go into that for a moment, STRS. And we have, and so we should be able to run main, right? If I could type. Go, and it does basically nothing, but tells us that it starts up. So we have a one server. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is say tree-d just to give it structure. It really only has one thing, which is a command subdirectory in it. Okay, if we just do tree, what we actually, the command that we issued when we did the, over on this side, we did the Cobra init, gave it the name of the application we wanted. The -A is an attribution for whoever you want to give credit for this, right? So it could be your workplace or whatever. And then you can specify a license agreement if you want, and I just told it, let's use the MIT license. So that, or you can ignore those things and not do any of them. It's up to you. So with that, now what we see is, let's take a look and see what we've actually got here. The main.go, we've got a lot of copyright. It put the attribution up there in it for us, right? Gave us our copyright from our MIT, I guess. And it does one thing, and it includes strings command. And in command, it creates it executes the execution. So we've got that. Shift quit command and root.go. And in here again we have that, and here's our whole command. What do we got? Import package, our package command. Our package command, we have an import, did several things. File, and then we have a prefix description, so we should probably update that at some point, right? A longer description if we want. And then finally, our execute which is a global function just exported. It's not a member function of anything at this point, right? Okay. And the execute is not doing anything really exciting. It just says, you know, run the root command execute, and we'll go there. There's also some inits that you can use to initialize your application. It supports Viper out of the box as a flag package. Someone who, I've used Viper a little bit. Other people I know brought up FF, I guess, which is the FF package was like friendly flags or fast flags or something like that. But you know, like that, there's obviously the basic flags command that everything is built on top of. And at some point, those are interesting to get into, but not today. So that's your basic structure. Now, what can we do to make this actually do something? Well, let's get out of this. Let's go into the command and see what we've actually got. We've got just the root. It doesn't really do anything other than print off what we saw, right? So we said, well, let's build a server that'll do a concat command. Okay. So let's add a concat command to the server. This is existing code, but we're just going to go back up here, and if you do cobra, it's going to be ra-h. It gives you some nice little things that you can do with it. You can add the help in the init, which is what we did. So let's do an add, and we're just going to do cobra add concat. Okay. And now if we do tree again, what we can see is it added a new command. And if we wanted to add a join command underneath this, I did put this up on GitHub, so I have the README file and stuff like that up there, if anyone wants to go look at it. So now we've got a little bit more, and let's go look at our concat command and see what. Well, first let's see how this affected the application. So now if we do go run main, right? We still come up, but now it says that we have a new command available. So it automatically integrated that in, made this visible as a command line option to us, and we can now do something like that. And with this, it automatically supports the -h and the toggle. So that pretty much brought up what we wanted, but now we can also say, let's go concat. Concat says it was called, so we know something happened. We'll go see how that happened in a moment. And you can also have command line flags that are specific to each of your commands. So for instance, if you're building, like I had an idea today, lady I'm working with, she wanted to inject some messages into RabbitMQ. And she had two different kinds of messages she wanted to inject in, one for albums and one for photos. And so what she had done is she had written two subroutines, one to inject the album data, one to inject the photo data. And then in her main routine, she basically did all her setup for initializing, connecting to RabbitMQ, and then she went in and and commented out the one that she didn't want to call and left the one that she did want to call in there. She ran it, and then when she wanted to run the other one, she had to go into the application and change the comments, right? So it depends on which subroutine she wanted to execute. That's the one she uncommented. Well, I was thinking we could do this with Cobra, because then we could just simply have two different commands, one for albums, one for photos, for testing purposes. You could have flags that were specific, that were general, because they were applicable everywhere. The information you needed to connect to RabbitMQ, authentication, that kind of stuff, right? And then you could add a command for, say, albums and give it a list of IDs that were album-specific IDs. And then you could do the same thing for photos and provide that kind of information. So you could build a little test tool that would support, that testing with something like this command line utility, and you can do it fairly quickly. Okay, so we now support a concat command. Well, what can we do with it? Let's see where we're at. again, we have the command, so we're going to go into CMD. And in CMD now we have a concat. So we're going to take a look at that. By concat.go. And now we've included this. Again, we have our own help that we can put in here. So we could add and then we can have a longer one. Escape. Multiple screens. And we don't really need any of this other stuff here, so we're going to okay. So here's our actual function.
Yeah.
Comma after short.
I'm sorry, is that? What'd I do?
Using a comma at the end of short.
I did. Well, that's because it's should actually be there, I think. What I did is I deleted the comma at the end of. I need a comma at the end of short. Thank you. Okay. If you go and look at the covert command, there are actually a lot of different options available. We have a run, and the run, notice, it takes a function that does not return an error. Sometimes you want to return an error out of your function. And if you do that, what you have to do is, the way they solved it, is they actually have a different different hook that's called run capital E. So run capital E is if you wanted to write a function that's going to return an error, instead of calling run here, you do run capital E. If you have something really complicated, they actually have like a pre-run step and a post-run step, so they have different hooks in that command. You could implement them, and so if you need to, you can do a quite sophisticated setup and teardown after you do this. So there's a lot of flexibility in the package, the layout. Okay, so we have this, and all that we do is the root command. It adds our concat command, which we just did. And the concat command currently is just takes this function that calls concat call, right? So it just took a function. But and we could, what can we do with this? Well, one of the things that we could do is just see what our arguments are that are getting passed in. So I'm going to change this to printf because I don't much care for print line. And we're going to do, and we'll just say args %v and comma args, just to see what we can get out of this thing to start with, right? Okay, so now back here in yes, how's that? Okay, so here go run main go.
Mail.
Oh, mail, thank you. Now you, okay, and we still have that. Oh, well, we have the concat command. Let's add that. It just tells us arg is nothing, right? So the ideal eventually with this is that you'd be able to say this and do like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And right now it just tells us that we get a slice of those. So our args are pretty much anything that you get like in C or C+ or any of those type of main languages, right? Okay, so let's do just a simple implementation of doing that. We'll write our concat function again, and we can just simply do something as, I'm going to do it a little bit. Let's see, I'm going to say bar. That's a string, and we'll just do a all strings, right? And we can just simply do S plus equal A. And we're done with that. Okay, and then finally, we do need to actually output this, right? So we want it just to come to the command line. So in this case, we can just do F of P. And here's a question for you. Do you feel it should emit a carriage return after the concatenation, or should it just purely return the string? I mean, this is a usability. It's really, we can implement it either way, right? But when if you were actually writing this command for usage, and you were going to call it embedded in something else, would you want it to actually, to concatenate and add that new line at the end of it?
If you look at other programs, the more standard usage would be to put the new line. If you take a look at Echo, for example, they actually have a flag pre-built for provided.
Where you inside that with a dash after it or dash?
I think it's dash now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and add that, right? Sure. So we're just going to do, and actually because of that, we can just do a print line for this. That should do the job, right? Okay, so now let's come back over to our previous one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is a way to do it, and if you're just writing something really small like this, just putting it line in the command is probably acceptable. But if you were going to do a larger package, what I've done in the past usually is at this level, I would tend to create a natural package for that command. So I might do something like make or concat, since that's my command, right? And then do you prefer main.go or concat.go?
Concat.go. Usually when you have like an entry point for an executable, that's usually what we call concat.
I've seen different packages do it different ways, and so I was kind of curious what your feel is on that.
Usually I'm doing just straight up go build. I'm not doing go build main, which will build it with the folder that you're in.
Right. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go with concat.go. Let's see, insert package concat, and we really don't need anything too sophisticated here, do we? We need a function of some kind, and that's going to take our string, and then we're going to do what? Pretty much the same thing that we did before, right? Or S strings, and of course we could do, it would be cheating to use the strings package, so we're not going to do that. And here, I think that I want my concat function to return a string, right? So we'll just do that, and then return tests. Okay, so nothing really exciting about this other than we built this structure now, right? And let's see. So now our tree looks like we're on one level. Well, tree. Okay. So now we have our command, which was generated by the Cobra command, and then we decided to build a little package to do whatever it is that's interesting that we want to build, right? Yeah, we put something in there, and then of course the last thing, we have to wire those two things together, right? So we'll go back into a command, open this up, and now what I'm not quite sure is how to reference that. from this perspective. Normally, let's see, cat's not right. If I were in GitHub, I'd know the path. And this is the one problem I have. Remember I said it built it into the base, right? And that's, yes.
So what?
The main does it, I think.
So what's your current directory?
Yeah, if we look at main.go, main does it, it just takes strings, which is our project, and then command. So I should be able to do string/concat.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. This is, okay, so now, and we should be able to get rid of all of this and just input X insert cat dot cat s or args. Right? So that should do that, and shift right, and let's see if it actually did the thing that we wanted to do. Go main. Undefined strings. Okay, well, duh. This is the problem with not using an editor that does half the work for you, right?
Wait, that's. Yeah, that wasn't where you.
What did I do wrong?
That's in concat
Oh,
go.
I'm in the wrong file, aren't I?
Yeah, that's to delete strings.
Yeah. Excuse me, duh. Let me go here. Concat, go. Let's put it in here.
Ooh. Now, so the problem is that you declared S as strings instead of strings.
Ah, thank you.
You get rid of the import strings.
We don't need it at all?
Yeah, you never use strings, right?
Oh, that's right, we're not doing anything strings or anything like that. And so, thank you, sir. And voila, okay. So, this is, now we've built a Cobra, we built a shell, and then we added which had nothing in it, right? We added a command, and we saw that when we did the add, it added a new file under that CMD. So again, going back to our tree view, when we added the new command for concat, it added that in there, and then we decided, as an implementation strategy, that we were going to build a separate package for the sophisticated implementation of the command that we might have, that we might actually do something with, right? And then invoke that way. And that's just a packaging issue. There wasn't any need to do it, but I think in general it's a better approach. Okay, now let's try to add another command. We've already got existing code. I don't want to break anything, right? But it really doesn't break anything. We just do Cobra, add, join. Okay, and so now we do our tree, and we have another file under command, which is join. And if we do join, it looks very similar. And with nothing but that, if we now do go run main, we have two new commands, or we have our concat and join, and joins, the description is automatically picked up from just adding that in there, right? So it's easy to add it, the framework builds it up for you, and you can just make those quick changes like that to put those in. And then of course we can go in and implement this. For instance, we could say that we're going to use a comma as our default for this join. I'm not going to do it right now, but I mean, you know, conceptually, say that we wanted to say with join, what we were gonna do is use we'll default to a comma, you give it a list and it does that, okay? But now suppose that what you wanna do is say, I wanna allow you to join with some other character, right? This is where using a command level flag becomes useful, because now you could provide an override for that joined character and put that on the command line and run through it. So that would be, you know, with this example on the basis, that would be where you might go with it next. Questions? Anything so far? Okay, everyone still has their eyes open, I'm impressed. Okay, so now, can we do this, but I like the Cobra command for command line utilities, that's what it's for. It's fast and easy to use, there's not a whole lot of baggage that comes with it. And I've used it, we kind of abused it a little bit in a couple of the projects I've been in. For instance, here's one project we worked on. We were working on a pub sub type of application where we had multiple queues that we were going to subscribe to, right, multiple topics. So what we ended up doing, rather than writing different servers for each of those, we wrote one Cobra application, so we had one repo that was going to connect to all of these queues, or deal with, man the code for all those queues. And each queue, we basically built a separate command for it. So when we were actually deploying it, what you deployed in your Kubernetes command was the executable and then the command to specify for that particular queue, right? So if we had we had Q1, Q2, Q3, what we would see here in our commands, literally, you can see like Q1, Q2, Q3, those separate commands, right? And then you could have one repository where it dealt with all the stuff around using, in this particular case, a Google Cloud Platform PubSub for setup and tear down and common stuff, right? And then you could also have the specifics for dealing with each kind of queue. That worked fine, but as a command line utility, the thing that's a little bit odd about it is most of these you run, it does something and it goes away. So what we had to do was actually spin off something that lived forever inside of it, right? That's the only part that felt a little bit odd about it. It worked fine, and I actually did the same thing in this particular job for, again, we were processing events and polling the database for them. And so we went into an infinite loop. But I used the Cobra command to do the initial generation of the server. So it was useful in a couple contexts where you might not initially think about it. Now, can we do something similar using Swagger? So let's talk about the Swagger tool, which is, again, I'm going to use the same context of the same kind of problem, but let's say now what we want to build is a REST server that will do this kind of thing, right? So what can we do with that? Okay, I'm not going to try to type it out all by hand here, so let's see what I've got. Actually, let's see, where are we at? Okay. CD to source GitHub RJJ work dash work is my particular little piece of CD to OrlanGo go Meetup, and this is 1903. Okay, generate servers. Oh, Swagger. Okay, and do I have a readme actually running? Let's see if we can get to something. Did I actually do something in here? Yes, I did. This is the bad thing about that text editor I was talking about, is if the width isn't wide enough, it looks like that. But anyway, so Swagger, do something, say something. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit. How many people use it? Anyone else? Okay, so Swagger is an ecosystem, I guess. I'm going to look at, let's see, Firefox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a different, let's see, that's the text one. It looks better here because it's full screen. Where did I put it at? You know what? I'm going to have to break down and actually use Chrome. Okay, I thought I had Swagger. And it is, I apologize, I'm not got it there. So it was in Markdown, SPF 13, Swagger editor. Here we go. Okay, so the Swagger.io, you can find out all about Swagger, but Swagger is a tool for defining an API. You're going to have a REST server, or you're going to have some kind of server where you need to define what your API is going to look like so that your clients can see it and provide documentation to that server. But it also their tooling to actually generate this.
Oh, well, you did it on the same tab, so it's disconnected.
Oh,
The screen share.
okay. So it's not here. Let's see.
Like if you go back.
Right. Let me pull that up. And are we sharing now?
No, you have to go back to that page I sent you. So
Okay.
go back on
Let's
that
see. Where? Yeah.
in the Chrome.
And did we do it in Chrome?
Yeah, and that same thing you just brought the Swagger up in.
Okay.
Go back one.
Ah, I see.
Because you brought it in the
Saying
same one.
that. Okay.
And then go
Here.
ahead and screen share again.
My apologies. Thank you.
That's fine.
Okay.
And then there you go.
Let's hit
Share.
share. And let's hit find. How's that?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so let's look at Chrome here for a minute. And actually, we're going to just look at, yeah, okay. So here is a definition of an API. In particular, it has a path / pet. This is just the one that came up. We're not going to try to do anything with this. Post method on this, and definition of your post, you put, Swagger will do that, but on this side you can actually see it in a much nicer way. So you can actually, you know, okay, this is what I'm actually trying to talk about and the endpoints that I'm supporting. And you can actually do some testing through this tool, I think, if I recall. I've never done it, but supposedly can. Now, we're going to do something much simpler. So I'm going to first and foremost find the file. Okay, here is our Swagger file. This is using the 2.0 specification. You have the description, version in it, and ideally, every time you make a change to this file that is published, you change the version, right? Sometimes that can be, oops, I forgot. Happens, right? Tags, we're not going to go too much into that. You can specify a base path, so everything will start, have that as a prefix on it. And in our particular case, we'll start out with one path, which would be /concat. And don't care about the security at the moment. We've got a summary. It has two different responses. What I haven't thought through yet is actually putting the data into it. But we can try that on the command line or something. Anyway, we'll see if we can get a little bit farther with this. So here is our whole file, and what I want to do is cat this, and I'm going to cat it because I'm going to take the entire piece, no, less that line. Okay, fine. We'll deal with it in a minute. Go back to our Swagger editor, Alt-A, delete that, Alt-V, and get rid of this last little piece. And now here's our API showing this. And so this can be a really nice little tool for validating that your YAML is correct, basically. And you can make changes over in the left-hand side of this, and then as long as you remember to then take that content and copy it back to your file, you know, everything's really good. Since the YAML file is just text, you can put that under source code control, so that's, you know, it's nice to have that way, right? Okay, so we've got a little, little thing. We have a get and cat, and we'll see what we can do with that going forward. So now, how can we actually generate a server? So what you do with Swagger is you use this, let me show you the command here. Okay, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to go up one level and make your strings like we had the other one. And I'm going to copy the ex strings ex YAML file to strings. We'll just call it strings.2.o.yaml. Okay, see these strings. So we've got nothing in this, right? And we'll take a look at this. I don't think there's anything that had ex in here that was, yeah, they're just examples. So there's nothing important here. You can add in additional paths if you wanted, but we'll have that. Okay, now that we have this, I want to generate an actual server. I'm using user local bin Swagger. So I'm actually the Swagger tool that I've installed using Homebrew, which is a Mac specific tool. But if you're on the Mac, it's kind of like a package manager because the Mac doesn't really have them. And so it provides a tool to do that, and I installed Swagger with that tool. And Swagger-h tells us a little bit about what's going on, expand, flatten, init, and so on, right? So since I already have a document, I don't need to init it, we're just going to use the generate. So let's give it a shot here. We're going to copy that line to start with. Paste it in here, and we're going to fix that. So we also want to call it strings, like that. So Swagger, to generate, then we're telling it to generate a server, and we're going to target it to be generated in the subdirectory I'm at, right? Gave it a name and told it what the spec file is. Okay. So we hit return. We get a ton of stuff that scrolls by on the screen. And now let's see what we actually have. Let's first do just a D. A little more than what we got with the Cobra command. Cobra command, remember, what we just simply had was the CMD subdirectory and a main.go. Right? Here, it breaks it up into the command, which is the string server. And then this REST API, which is going to be where a lot of other interesting stuff goes in. Now, if we had built into our API, we had specified object definitions of saying that we're getting like parameters, or we have a complex object that has embedded fields and whatnot. You can define that in Swagger. Then we would also end up generating a model subdirectory, and so it'll auto-generate that for you. You don't have to worry about it. It ties all the pieces together. But this is kind of the bare basic, the basics of that, right? Okay, what can we do with this right now? We can do go run. There is no main. If I just do tree instead of tree here. Here's what we actually get. Our main.go is down here. So it's organized a little bit different than what we do with Cobra. This config file is very important to you. This is one of the files that you will actually edit, and once you touch it, when you regenerate the server, it will not overwrite that. A lot of this other code will actually get overwritten, so you can edit it if you want, but if you regenerate the server, it'll go away, or get modified in some way or other. Operations, put it under, because we call it tag, we put it under example. We have an API that we could look at, server.go, and our YAML file. Okay, so now so to run this, you have to do a go run command, and then make that go. And it says, oh, it starts up and dies almost immediately about TLS. So what's that all about? Well, let's do -h. Okay, so since this is a REST server, or since it's an HTTP server, there's more complexity that you potentially want to configure, and it's all generated out of the box for you, at least the ability to support it. Of all the things that's important, we're going to not be running with security, so I'm not going to run HTTPS, I'm just going to run HTTP. And to do that, I need to tell it that the scheme is going to be HTTP. So that's really what's happening, because the error we're getting says I don't have any of the certificates or any of the other security stuff that I might want to do otherwise, right? So we're going to do this dash scheme equal HTTP, and your server is up and running now. So we create your API document to Swagger generate, and you got this. And what I tend to do is that Swagger generate command, I usually create like a bin subdirectory in my repo, and underneath that I'll put a generate.sh file, and I'll just capture that command in there one time so I don't forget what it was that I was putting, right? However it works for you is fine. You put it in the README file, whatever you want to do. Okay, so we could technically hit this. Let's see what happens if we do. Let's go back to Chrome, I guess. And path not found. So not a whole lot, but we said that it was did we specify /concat? But it's not that. Remember, the prefix was v0. v/v0/ So we've actually got a working operation, has not yet been implemented. But this is where we had done over here and specified our base path was v0. That's why we needed to have the v0 here, right? And then we had specified that our path was /concat. So did that. And so now we actually have a quote working web server, unquote, right? Now we just have to add into it. So we can tear into that a little bit. Let's see where we're at. Okay, I'm going to switch from using vi to using VS Code, because we can bring up multiple tabs and switch back and forth a little easier. Still showing the screen, right? We're good?
Can we stop for a moment?
Yes, we can.
And just recognize the fact that you just said vi instead of vi.
I said what?
I'm sorry.
Just vi. Yeah, I said.
You said vi? Okay.
Yeah, vi. Yeah, vi.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm with you.
Let's see. When did I first ran across? There wasn't a Vim when I started. It really was vi, and or vi, and so that was.
I just messed with you. I've always heard it called VI.
Oh, yeah.
I've literally never heard anyone say vi.
Yeah.
I was just messing with you.
Well, that's not a problem. You know what? If you really want to go back that far, you should try Kiko.
Oh, yeah.
How about Ed? Ed's Tico, when I first started, Tico was a command line editor on, that was line oriented. When the first terminals that I used had paper, thermal paper. And so they would have a printhead that would go across, and you know, as you would type, when you did delete, it basically it started a new line, right? And so you got kind of this history of what you were typing as you went through with it. And Tico had commands that said things like, move forward 3 characters, and then replace the next 2 with this, and use things like slashes and asterisks and dots and exclamation marks. And when it was all said and done, if you've ever used an old modem that was on a noisy line and it sounded like beep, and you got this garbage on your screen, that's what a typical Tico command looked like.
Oh, wow.
It really was.
Line noise, huh?
Yeah, it really was pretty crazy. Anyway, let's go back to where we were at. So we're going to kill this for a minute. Let's code doc. See if that'll do what okay. So here's our REST server that we have so far, right? And the thing that we don't have is, let's look at what main looks like. Main you'll generally never touch, and I don't think I've ever edited anything in here, but it can be interesting to go and look at it to see how the server kind of starts itself up, right? The thing that mostly that you'll go into is right here, configure strings, your configure file. And this one, in particular, the configure API, is where you'll want to put most of your hooks. You want to build it. What we saw was happening is that we executed the concat command, and what really actually happened is the API, let's go look at that for a moment. Our operation, here's our string API that got generated. The new strings API does all of this good stuff, and then it adds in these hooks for these handlers, so you can specify that. And what gets initially put in here is operation not done, right? But you can override this in the configuration so that we can say API, hey, for that particular value, put in my own function that I want to have. And this is a typical REST server function, or HTTP function that, you know, is basically a handler, middleware responder, and all that type of stuff. Hello. So that's, this is where we would now instrument this. And so I think I'd like to take just a moment and stop talking and take a sip. Yeah. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So let's see, recap. What did we get? We started with nothing but a YAML document that just specified that we had a base path and that we had a path called concat on it, right? And this would, we can add in responses. You can also add in properties here. You can say get, post, all the different HTTP verbs that you might have. You can specify it that way. And then we use the Swagger command to generate a working server. And then we were able to just run that server immediately. So that part of it goes forward. Now, when we're looking at the structure of what we actually got generated, I'm ready, I think, to try to implement something here. So, first thing that we can do to convince ourselves that if we make a change there is we can just change that verbiage, right, to see what happens. But the other thing to think, to recognize that what's happened here, let me close this down a little bit. We're providing a function that responds with a middleware responder, and what we're going to the middleware option is non-implemented. This is a, what, HTTP 501?
Something like that.
One of the HTTP codes. These codes, if we are looking at the things that are generated in these operations, and we look at the responses, we had originally said in our API that we had 200 and 500, right? 500, not 501. Okay, and what happens in the generated portion of the AP, hold on, excuse me, there, responses, this does the concat in a way it builds a little structure for each of the responses, and it names them based on the HTTP status names, right, that you specify. So we have an OK at 200, so we get that. Then it will lay off a few commands that are write the response based on that, and then we have our 500, and it said OK. The structure doesn't really have much in it, but now we can hang a method off of that says we want to generate a new one of those, and you can do a write response that will write one of those types of things for you that generates our generates the stuff you want. So this is part of the framework of how it hooks this stuff together. If you have more status codes that you're going to deal with, you'll see a lot more pieces get put in here. And each of these, notice but the names are based on that path name. You get 4 of them. We're getting the parameters. We don't have any parameters here, so there's nothing that's really in this. The response, you have a URL builder, so that if you're doing redirects or if you just need to construct these, rather than doing it by concatenating string, you can use these use the automatically built ones and guarantee that it'll match your spec. That's all. And I forget what handler function. So it defines this type, says that it will take those parameters and it will respond to one of those. Okay. Let's try to do something useful. I'm going to go into the file that I said that we use the most is, or we'll change the most, is configuration string. So the first thing we're going to try to do is just validate to ourselves that this is actually what's getting sent, right? So let's just change this to do something. Nothing else really going on there. And with that, now we're going to run our same command. And again, the reason, as opposed to our Cobra server, which just was main was in that, you're going to run underneath, your server sits underneath command. And since we're not running HTTPS, we have to specify scheme. And now we have supposedly a new server running. So let's grab that. Let's go back over here. Again, we get our message that path isn't there, right? Because our path has a base path of /b0 for this part, and a cat. Okay, so do something here. Well, the next step of this would be to actually then implement an actual handler function and substitute the handler function in at that point. And that's where I'm going to stop. Okay? So, Dustin, it's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that was awesome. That was a good job. Is there any questions? Anyone wanted to add anything, or?
Any questions? So, you know, those two commands, you get command line server, and you can build up a REST API really fast. The last thing I guess I would like to show is that we saw with the Cobra that we could add a new command with just saying Cobra add, right? What do we do with Swagger? We've got the server, now we add a handler, and now we want to add another endpoint. How can we do that? The answer is you go back to your YAML file, and we're just going to
keep adding another thing to it?
Yeah, we're going to add another path, and we'll call this join. And, terms of a list, single string, string with a default join character. And, again, and I assume most of you recognize the reference to the thing there. The problem, no problems, or remember they're taking when Wolowitz is heading up to space, and they're sitting in the capsule, and that they get a call from the fuel leakage. And they're getting ready to cancel it. Well, most of the time it's no problem in Russian astronauts. And then well, what happens? He said 9 times out of 10, no. What about the 10th time? Problem.
Nice.
There it is. Okay, enough of that. So we made a change to our swagger. So and then we can actually verify that that change is still makes sense, right? Because we'll go back to Chrome. We'll go into the Swagger editor, and I'm going to just delete all that and put my new one in. And if I don't get any errors out of this, then my Swagger is probably acceptable. And here we can see we've got a new endpoint, which is that, right? Okay, so I'm comfortable enough with my Swagger being okay. Now what do I do to generate the new server? Well, let's kill the old one. And all we do is our same command that we originally used, which Swagger generate, we're just going to regenerate right in place. We did make at least one little change to the one handler, so it said do something or here, right? So we can tell if it overwrites that, we'd at least have empirical proof that it went back to what it was or not.
We implemented version 2, right?
We didn't, but we should. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's go ahead and make that 0.02. And so now we regenerate, no errors. And if we do our tree-d again, looks pretty much the same as it did before. If we do just tree, what we see is we got, again, a new set of command files. So that like the 4 that we had here for concat, we got 4 more now for join. And basically, you'll see that pattern over and over again. As you add more endpoints, you'll get a collection like this on it. And then the last thing that we'll go and look at is in that config file. Well,
It's a VS Code thing, I guess.
here's a do something, but oh, that's right. It won't overwrite this. So it doesn't modify this. So this is the one thing you're going to have to actually go in and manually add the new endpoint. If we look at our API originally had the concat handler. Now it also has the example get join handler. So what since it regenerated this, but it doesn't overwrite that config file. So to add this new endpoint, you are going to have to manually go in here into the config and do what? Copy and paste, right? And this time, this is going to be a get join handler. And the parameters are no longer going to be get concat, they're going to get join. And then the message doesn't matter, but we're going to call get join, do something else. Okay. So, what did it not like? What? We have REST API, so we have that. What did I go wrong? Cannot use function. Concat handler. Oh. Sign in the wrong thing. Right? The API that we want to, the piece that we want to do is this one here. So let's go back into here. Let's configure and change that. And now it's happy. And so now we should be able to start the server up again. If I can find the command window that I did it in. Oh, right there. Okay, thank you. And it's go run command string server go, and it's going to complain because I forgot what dash d equal HTTP. Okay, so now we're at 62.143. And come here, change our port. We had our concat, but now we should be able to also have join. Okay, so that's the other important point about the Swagger, is that by just changing the API, you can regenerate, then you have to manually slide the pieces in, and of course you're going to have to implement your own handler. But that's that. Now I'm really going to shut up. Dustin,
No,
the floor is yours.
All right. So, yeah, thank you again. If there's any questions. So I only have a few things prepared here. Give me a second here while I try to figure out how we're going to present this.
See, we need to be on a different input. Should stop sharing, I see. Okay.
Yeah, well, I've just got a couple slides here. I don't know how you've got the screen recording, but we could technically run it on your system, or we could try to swap it on the TV and stuff like that. So I can just
with a
share.
screen share, he needed to do send you a link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
URL.
So we'd have
Or
to
we
do
can-
one or the other,
Or we can put it on here if you want to.
either is fine, I guess. I can share you the presentation. It's just an online Google present thing. If you
Okay.
have, I don't know if you have Google Docs or if you have a Google account.
Yes, I do have a Google account.
Okay.
Let's get you logged in. Or
If you want to
close
just
it.
put in your email address, you should get a thing. I can do this, or
Okay.
I don't know what's easiest. Pardon us. We might have like a little couple-minute intermission if you guys want to take a quick bio break or something. Just need a couple minutes to
There it is.
figure this out.
Where's the ad sign?
Oh, it's the fancy keyboard. It's
Oh,
they
two
shifted
levels,
the
huh?
key. Well, they shifted the keys, like the arrow keys. That's the only thing. Like, this is a wonderful laptop, but the arrow keys drive me crazy.
Okay.
You guys are splitting, or?
Yeah, just quick. We're just taking a quick
Oh,
look,
okay.
because it's going to take a second to set this up. Okay, so I should have shared that, and then that way the screen recording stuff doesn't get messed up.
Okay, so go for it.
Okay, so actually, do you want to check and see if you got that email or?
Okay. Let's go here.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
There we go.
Is it gonna work?
Open the slides.
This is scary.
Do we need to open this up in,
So this is actually recent, and it was fixed quite aggressively, I can say. There is an issue in a more current version of Go, Go 11.5, and I think some of the earlier point release versions are affected by this. But I wanted to kind of bring this up just because it's an interesting thing. The net HTTP package is susceptible to a particular edge case in terms of security. So control our carriage return line feed can be injected here. So this is, I just figured I'd mention this because this literally just happened a couple days ago. Like I said, it was fixed in 1.12. But anyway, I thought it was worth kind of going over this. The particular proof of concept example here is, first of all, if you know a little bit about the HTTP protocol and the delineation of the headers to the actual content body using HTTP 2 or excuse me 1 or 1.1, the new line is kind of the boundary. So what can happen here is just without doing input sanitization, you can have headers that are injected, for example. So here's some example code, proof of concept, that was included in this recent Go model here. So you've got, you're just using HTTP client, and if you're able to pass in the host headers, for example, and you could do a domain or IP address or whatever, but kind of the issue here is we have a carriage return line feed, and then you can have any type of headers that you'd like to inject in the request. So this could be problematic because you could pass in cookies, you could pass in any type of HTTP headers and stuff like that. So this is kind of a classic injection within the a header injection type thing. So let's just kind of walk through this a little bit because I think it's kind of interesting. So you're just kind of crafting up the URL here. So if you were to take the host or something, it could be from a configuration file, it could be from an argument or whatever, and then do the request. You can see here, instead of that being parsed with the domain or the IP address or whatever, you're able to kind of go beyond the scope or the boundary of the actual request. So this leaks into the HTTP string, so you can do get or post or whatever, and that header will actually be injected. So here's basically an example. This could be an actual API endpoint. They're just using netcat as just a very simple example. So this is netcat, which is a command line utility that you can listen on a particular port, TCP port 7777, and then this is basically going to listen on that socket, and then you can see, if you had a web server or Go sitting on the back end here, it would take the injected header. So I just thought this was kind of interesting, and it was fixed rather promptly. That was really good. There's a couple of examples. These are in the classification of server-side request forgery. You can make a request to say like a Redis or Memcache endpoint or anything that is a fairly simple. You could possibly do SMTP and other types of protocols because they don't require a whole lot in terms of the protocol. So you could post actual different say like SMTP or mail messages, and then it could be executed. And here's kind of another example that was written. Here's a proof of concept. As you can see, the Redis is using a set, so it's a key value, so you have set success, and you're just kind of using this line feed to allow it to do another protocol, and this is all just within the host itself. So it was fixed in Go 1.12, so that's good. So I just figured I would kind of break this up because it's interesting. Discussion point and injection, you know, as we've kind of talked about before, the OWASP top 10 and stuff like that. They're famous for, you know, educating and bringing about awareness of security issues. And injection, it's not just SQL injection, but injection in all forms. You know, this is just, you know, a very common vulnerability. So, any questions or anything else?
So, what do they do to fix this? I mean, what?
Oh, so it's a matter of, you know, not allowing control characters.
Okay.
So there are certain character sets that you would not want to allow. In this example, we're doing a concatenation here. So there's a couple of things, but the vulnerability itself was in the net HTTP, the code. I don't know if there's any code attached to this. I don't know where the pull request is, but it might be attached here. Let's see the pull request. I'll let it pull back to go to that. So, yeah, so they actually, you know, sanitize the input as it goes into the request, you know, as it's generating the protocol.
So do they script out the control characters, or they reject everything after?
Right.
Or?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to accept any type of control characters, you know, especially new line stuff.
But what happens when there are control characters in it? Does it just
And which
strip them out, or does it return an error, or like how does it handle that?
How do you do multiple? Yep.
So I thought, I don't see a pull request related to this, so I didn't actually look at the fix. I just saw that. Oh wait, we're going to see this. That is.
I think that just showed it probably gives a malformed. What's here? Allows click on that. What happens?
Oh, this looks like another Go issue here.
And so is there?
Malform query round
But
trip.
is there a?
Says you wrong first.
Is there an associated patch or request for this one?
Well, it was fixed somewhere.
So Brad Fitz responded, so add it, and this is, keep going.
Okay.
Almost. There we go.
Okay, cool.
So if you click on that, change all.
Oh, cool. So that's it. Okay.
Right, if you scroll down, you should, in the patch set, nope, scroll up, stop, right there, so.
Okay, OrlanGo. Okay, and the test. Cool. Oh, that's neat. Okay. So, right.
So then valid query. There we go.
All right, look at this. Okay, cool. So it looks like they dug into the RFC, and then this is the BNF, or the extended Bacchus-Nar form. So this is using a known whitelist and validating to make sure that the expected characters are exactly what are supposed to be received. So this is good. So they actually dug into the RFCs right there. Look at this. Put the RFC in there. And to be fair, this vulnerability was very similar to another one that happened in Debian Ubuntu when you're downloading the packages over HTTP. Even though they do hashing and secure cryptographic hashes, it was susceptible to an injection, a very similar type thing. So these types of vulnerabilities are somewhat common, and so they also got bit with that, and they fixed it. So essentially, you were subject to another vulnerability that was similar. You were subject to man in the middle, and someone could essentially hijack and run code on your system when you're doing an update on Ubuntu. This was like a month or two ago.
I was actually hearing about that. There was an article that was posted somewhere. I can't remember which subreddit it was, and it was like an argument as to why it was better for it to they wanted to. They're just going to use HTTP because they're just going to use HTTP for the package. Oh, it was scratch that, but I remember seeing something explicitly where like, hey, we're just going to use HTTP because, you know what, they're just going to be able to tell what package you have anyway, so.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so you could do that as long as you hash it, but the problem was in their C code for apt, it was vulnerable to a very similar type of injection thing.
I see.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's running as root, so that's badness.
In the scenario that
Oh.
they were describing on the bug, the
Mhm.
Go bug itself,
I can open up another tab here. Back to this one real quick. Yes?
one of the scenarios they give is injecting a value on Redis.
Uh-huh.
But Redis doesn't have an HTTP interface, so how did they do that?
It doesn't have an HTTP interface, however, it does. So, because HTTP is simple, you can do certain commands and the same thing. So this is server-side request forgery, and essentially what you're doing is, you know, the actual set value. So this is a
Okay,
memcache.
that's assuming that the guy has complete control over the URL, and that
That's
he's
right.
using that to connect
Well, look at the port.
to connect to Redis, and then send some up. Like it's gonna send a host first. That's not gonna work, but the second part's gonna
That's
work.
correct. That, you're exactly right, and that is exactly how these server-side request forgeries work. Because you could potentially do the same thing with SMTP, right? And you get, you know, sort of the hello or you'll get, you know, the host headers, right, and other stuff, and it just say error. And then as soon as you get a valid command, so yeah, this could be, you know, potentially dangerous, especially, you know, because you're going from one boundary, like if you have the, say, an endpoint or whatever, and then if you're able to, you know, only have like a firewall there, from the web perspective, web server perspective, you could, you know, jump onto a Redis or a memcache or send out spam or something like that. So
Yeah, so so if you have like a service running on, like if you have a service that downloads anything and saves locally, let's say I can tell it to download a certain URL, and then I can actually get that, make that write a value on the Redis of your infrastructure.
yeah. So I'd say for, you know, kind of addressing this is always make sure that you're using the latest, you know, not only from the Go version, but all of your dependencies, and regularly check to make sure that those are good and valid and have no known vulnerabilities. The other part is, you know, input sanitization, and primarily because the internet is a global, you know, area. You know, this could be, well, the attacker could be anywhere, right? It could be, or the threat actor could be, you know, anywhere, right? And you know, so you have a high risk of anyone being able to do that. Of course, even if you had it within an internal scope network, you still have one bad actor and, you know, do the same thing. So, yeah, that's pretty much all. I was just going to kind of highlight that, you know, abusing protocols and things like that is kind of an interesting perspective and everything. So that's that. But yeah, good thing is that it was, you know, fixed quite rapidly. Whoops.
So it says 11.5, so is there Go 11.6?
They fixed it in 1.12.
Okay.
And this would be vulnerable in some of the other earlier point releases as well. I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, I don't know how long it's been. You could figure out the range, but you know, it's fixed in the later version. Okay, so I was actually going to go over some of the more basic stuff, and actually did not have as much time as I would like to prepare more material. So I was just going to actually go through some of the basic stuff. But I was expecting 2, possibly 3 more people here, and they weren't able to get in, or I don't know what happened exactly. So I don't know if we want to go over any of this or not. It's almost 9 o'clock. Or if anyone would like to add anything.
Actually, you know, there's so many different resources out there for Go.
There is a ton, absolutely.
You look here, and I stumbled across Go by example.
Yeah, it would have been really good because I was kind of tailoring some of this. Just because I ran out of time, I actually had some emergencies come up that
One thing that I do a lot is like I use GitHub to search for code snippets. Let's say I don't remember how to declare like use TLS with the HTTP client. I use the search on GitHub. You put like extension Go and then use that to search for snippets.
Oh, cool. Oh, and you also I think you posted one of the links on how to do TLS on localhost.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to set up and not have to do the scheme thing, it was a good article. It was on the
Right.
stuff.
Well, that's, one of the things I've run across is people that, once they get, they use HTTPS at the edge where their REST servers are at. But for instance, once they get inside of that, then they don't do that anymore. They drop the security.
Terminate. I guess it's a termination. You put the termination on a balancer, let's say, and then from there,
Everything else is assumed safe.
And that is a really good point because it is convenient to terminate on the edge, whatever you've got, those balancers or Nginx or whatever like that, and pass through. I can say as far as
as long as you control your infrastructure, everything. Yeah.
That's right.
Otherwise, you've got plain text running on the on the cable and those was listening.
That's right. Yeah. And as far as like modern cloud providers, they're really good about that. So it can be dangerous, but you can do that. It was designed to be end to end, right? So it was designed to be for one, from the client, from your web browser all the way to the end. However, there's also resilience in being able to terminate at the end, and then you can just pass, the actual request. You can also, instead of just doing HTTP, you can also redo and do another TLS session out to your server. If there's any kind of, problem like that, so you can, just redo the thing.
I had something. I was feeling. I wasn't sure what content we'd have today, so I kind of mostly before the meetup wrote up something really quick. Do you have 10 minutes?
Or if you like. How do we pass the recording?
I sent him the link also.
Okay.
But I don't know how he would
Do you have,
stream to that.
Yeah, I got the
HDMI.
I got the HDMI cable here. Yes.
Oh, were you just using it?
No.
He was using his.
Oh.
I didn't want to mess up the recording, and I figured it was less risky to. Oh, sorry. Grab it.
He will just refuse to be.
And now we need to figure out what channel we've got on.
I just focused on.
It was Linux. Okay, gotcha. It was Windows.
Thanks for letting me.
It's the second button down. Second from the top is the input button.
That's all the start minute.
Thanks for letting me.
Oh.
I would have to figure out how to
We were until there, you notice which input.
yeah, that's why I was kind of wanting, doing that. 'Cause I have no idea.
Let's see.
That's
B.
yes.
That's 2. Let's see.
And are you sure you're actually presenting a signal as well?
Okay. 2 should be mine again. Are we know that's actually plugged in? There you go.
maybe I can do this.
So you ended your screen share, right?
I'm sorry?
You ended the screen share?
I see the green lights.
Yeah, just go back to the
Okay,
tab
let
and
me-
screen share.
Yeah. let
Like
me-
it's super beta, so I don't even know what happens if multiple people screen screen. So.
Let's kill that. This one, should have been that little red dot.
Yeah, the one with the tab with the red dot, just hit end screen share or close the tab.
I only have Chrome running.
I think you moved it to the other one.
Well, it was still on Chrome though that we did it initially.
I feel like the story of my life is living in stuff in tabs.
But did that break it?
No, because you can see the still the green lights.
Right, but was it Firefox maybe?
No, it was Chrome, but as long as you close the Chrome, but then you probably just have to.
There, it's good. Yeah, that one. That one?
Yeah, they're, okay. Let's see.
Right.
Cool. Alright, so I see your screen, so
Cool.
just hit the little hide thing where it says at the bottom there.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Good stuff.
Employment challenges.
Including bash hacker. So I'm just making some fancy links. Like this. And that's how I generate HTML.
Okay.
I'm putting this up here because,
You want body, so okay.
We're gonna close the head for the body.
so I applied for a job. And this was one of the problems that they gave me. And I was supposed to do this like in this like web interface thing. So it would give me like this text input box, and I had to like code and go in that box, and it really sucked. It was very difficult to do that because I use VIM, and it's not quite an IDE, but it does like a lot of cool stuff for me with Vim Go. So I had a very, very, very difficult time with it, but I completed it. So this was the challenge, and basically given a slice of strings, and that was kind of like a signal to me in the first place. Like I kind of wonder, like, isn't that kind of weird to have like a slice of strings, like have a web page represented as a slice of strings? So basically, you know, the data they gave me was like a slice of strings, and each slice contained a line from like some web page.
Okay.
And so what I was supposed to do is read that slice, find the URLs like HTTP or HTTPS, extract the domain portion of each URL. If the URL starts with www, w3, or web, strip that part off, and then eventually return a comma-separated list of all the unique domains that I can find on the page, sorted.
Not a slice, or you mean like a CSV
Nope,
string, or?
just a comma-separated.
So once you get the slice, you do a join and.
Yeah. Once you like figure all this stuff out, you put them in a slice and join them. So one of the things I was thinking is like, see if you guys can do that. Or what approach would you use to do this?
Has anyone heard of something called Grok? It's an extension to regex.
No.
Basically what it allows you to do is, okay, it is regex. You can set up patterns where you can be like, alright, well, in this case, domain, that's the URL. You would set up your regex for what a URL would be, and then you can set up your like a domain one, which would then be a subsection of it, so you can have it as HTTPS, something like that, and then you can have
Domains.
Let's go brackets. And then whatever else you need to do for that. So then when you parse the particular regex, it would actually say you'd have the domain, and then you also have this additional part right here that would actually return the one I used was in Logstash, so it automatically injected that into the resulting document. But other implementations I've seen, like actually fill in, like maybe a map has domain and would have that pull that information out. Might require a little bit of like working with that, but I imagine that'd be like super fast in order to take that information.
Let's say you had to use standard library.
Yeah, standard library. I was just saying, like, this could be useful for anyone. I have seen the Go implementation. If anyone wants, like, me to see some in the future, but
Yeah, sounds interesting.
So, just a quick question. So Golang.org wouldn't appear in the list, or?
Oh, that was just me being stupid. I typed this up like.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering if there was like some reason why that one.
Sorry. Yeah, like this. I wrote this like while we were sitting. Sitting. All right, so okay.
Similar approach. Why would there be an issue with using like a regex in that case?
Oh, you could. Can you match URLs using regex? Yes, you could.
Well, probably what I would start looking at, that's what I am looking at right now, is probably want to batch it multiple times on the same string. So you have multiple of those pair.
So do you feel like having a slice of strings kind of throws a monkey wrench into it in any way?
The question I've got for you is there any chance that anything's split on the string boundary?
There you
That's
go.
a good question. I don't
That's
know.
a great question. Because it could be.
Could be.
New line.
Is that a valid URL though?
Well, if there's screen scraping, it might have just gotten split.
Right.
Right.
So I would expect that a URL couldn't span lines, but that's an interesting edge case to think about. So I was really frustrated by this, and I thought first that having a slice of strings was kind of annoying. Like, what I would expect is either just a single string, or more, or better, just IO reader, right? Because I don't, especially a web page or even like a string, I really don't care about. I don't care to have it like split. Give me a reader, and I can read from the reader, and I can parse the data, and so on. So I was running out of time. Part just mostly like being irritated by this problem, and this was my solution. What I was going to do is see if any of you guys are interested in trying it, but I feel like it's late, and I don't feel like it's that interesting a problem.
I might try it, if I'm not here.
I was just still
Yeah.
What's that?
Try it at home.
You want to try it at home?
Yeah,
Well, that's why I put it up on the webpage. I would love to see what you guys come up with, maybe at the next meetup. Then, interested in that?
Yeah.
So I'll send an email to everybody with this. I had less than an hour to do this. I would love to see other solutions to this.
Can I ask, did you use, or can I ask a question about it, or are you gonna fish it?
Sure. I reserve the right not to answer questions since it's now a challenge. So.
Well, I reserve the right to not ask the question. No,
Okay.
I'm just kidding. No, I was just curious. And did you end up using? Well, actually, no. I'm not.
Did I end up using what?
Nope.
I'd like to. That sounds good. Did I end up using what?
Nope.
I'd like the opportunity to reject this question. Can you please go ahead and answer?
But I have to ask it. No.
Go ahead.
Did you end up using regular expressions?
I'm not gonna answer this question.
That's crazy.
Anybody else have any other questions about it?
I have another question.
Not now.
Not now?
No, I
No,
think
shooting
pretty
down
sure
here.
it's me.
Alright, so go to this website I just created before your eyes using Bash and .NET. Yeah, this is like the worst. Like, oh my god, my history.
Performance.
Yeah.
What were you talking about your history? What was that you were saying earlier?
Hold on a sec. Where did I put this?
Because it'll be preserved for millions of years.
I thought everyone was really good about clearing the cache after every single page redirect.
Carrying cache. I always thought like before if I ever have to do like a big talk or a big conference or something like that, I would, in order to like be sure everything's gone, I'd have to clear my cache, uninstall my browser, and then burn my laptop and buy a new one, and then use that laptop.
And then you end up signing into Chrome and all the issues that
You have like or incognito mode.
I know, right? Cancel my Gmail, Google account.
Go to incognito
Change my
mode,
identity.
Incognito mode, or
I'm just
the
Even better.
browser you don't use.
Perfect way to ensure that you have no history. Demo using Edge.
What's that again?
To
demo using Edge, that's right.
Go out, no history.
That's great. Actually, I have it in here. SCP.
Yeah, I guess you could run it through
So-
Wine, maybe. I don't know. Can you run Edge through Wine? That's a scary. That's a scary one.
So yeah, I recommend you go here. You can write it down, I guess.
I'll be honest, I can't even read that from here.
// employment-challenge. And so you'll see ec.go and ec test. The test file is literally just that. Of course, it downloads it. Sorry.
Mime type, can you change your mime to? Excuse me.
Oh, hyphen challenge.
Yeah, underscores are for the losers, frankly. You have to hit shift in order to get it. So like
You
dash
said,
always.
You said that, you said dash and I heard slash.
Oh, I
Yes,
see.
I tried slash
Underscore is
too,
pretty
you're not allowed.
distinctive. Employment challenge.
So here goes a test, right? EC_test. And so this one just goes like Alibaba. I tried Starter Studio, but I didn't have time to like really finish it. But this is the data that I extracted from Alibaba. And so you can add your own tests or whatever, but this will exercise that function, and it even, so what it does is it connects to a website, or it connects to a URL, downloads it, splits it into a slice of strings, and then passes it to your thing. And so yeah, like seriously. So next time you come, I want to see. You know what? I'm so anxious to see this. Maybe it doesn't have to be next time, because next time I plan to go over writing a ray tracer and go.
Whoa.
So
No, I got a pragmatic programmer email link, and there's someone who's written. They have a whole little course that basically is challenging to do exactly that, and saying they'll walk you through the whole thing from start to finish.
yeah, there's a ray tracer in a weekend, and that's what I was going to go through. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's surprisingly approachable, and what I hope to do is like inspire you guys to do it on your own, or you can do it on your own. Maybe next month we can compare ray tracers. But
I was watching, have you ever heard of a ray marcher?
no.
It's basically a more computationally efficient variation on a ray tracer. It doesn't do the same sort of things, but the same idea. I find it funny that you mentioned that, because I was thinking about translating the ray marcher that I saw into Go, because it was originally meant to see.
Well, why don't you do it? Now I'll shut up and you can.
No,
try it.
It'll be fascinating.
Yeah. Why don't you do it? No, you're like no, not gonna do
I
it.
have no guarantee that I'm going to work on the same project 2 days in a row. So
Yeah, that's
sorry.
All right, so that's that. I was going to go over my solution, because my solution would have either gotten me like rejected outright, like right away, or hired, and it was kind of a toss-up.
Right.
and it worked for me. So yeah. And so the second thing, I think there's like a sleeper talk at GopherCon last year by Brian C. Mills.
A sleeper in which way?
Well,
Not appreciated the way it should be?
it not appreciated the way it should be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Although his delivery is kind of dry. This is with complete respect to Brian Mills, brilliant person, but I think people dismiss it because it was a little bit like dry. Like it was very like, but I was there and I watched it, and I don't think I appreciated it until I left and came back to it. One of the cool things he talked about was rethinking how we do worker pools in Go. And I tried to find the URL, and in fact, he started talking in the middle of Ralph's thing earlier, and I meant to paste the URL in here, and I didn't. So I was so excited by this. What he described was the kind of traditional way to create a worker pool in Go is one where you pre-spawn Go routines, right? And then each Go routine will listen on a channel and fetch work to do. And the idea is that if you want to bound your workers to like a certain limit, you might like spawn like runtime num-CPU number of Go routines, and again each will like listen on a channel, and then something that wants to submit work will send it. So that's what this does. This is kind of like my traditional like pooled worker pool thing. So it takes a concurrency level, couldn't think of anything better, and it iterates and it creates that number of Go routines. Each one of those Go routines waits and reads from that channel. And so one of the things that's traditional. But if you guys ever read like Concurrency in Go, which is a really good book, one of the things it does is it helps you benchmark actual Go routine startup times. And Go routines start up like really stupidly fast, like on the order of nanoseconds. You can start a Go routine. And so I think this like traditional worker pool model is appealing because people who used to do stuff like with p-threads, you'd pre-spawn threads and then find some way of like yeah. And so we're used to that model, but that's because even spawning p-threads is kind of heavyweight compared to spawning Go routines, right? Go routines is yet even lighter kind of lightweight process, extremely lightweight process. So I think when this is the way I used to always do worker pools. And so part of Brian's talk, he basically explains that that sucks for the following reasons. If you ever have a panic, what happens when you see a panic? What do you see on the screen when you panic?
You panic.
You get a backtrace of all the Go routines. And so let's say if they're not even doing anything, you get a backtrace. So like let's say you have some like super mega scale thing with like and you're tuning it and you're saying, well, I'm gonna want like 1 million Go routines, and then somebody panics in the middle of this, you're gonna get 1 million stack traces, and that sucks. Another thing is that there's a false sense of efficiency there because you think because you're pre-spawning these Go routines that you're doing less when you're activating them. But you allocate. But how much stack does each Go routine take? Come on, you're all Go programmers. You should be able to do it. It's only 2K, but 2K times how much ever that you just have sitting idle, waiting to read from a channel. So what he proposed was just spawning Go routines.
Stop counting when they started growing automatically.
Well, what's that again?
We stopped counting the size of the stacks when they started growing automatically.
Right. So what he proposes is starting a routine only when you need it. Don't pre-spawn them.
Right.
And you can control Go routine. And so again, one of the reasons you do pooled like worker pools is because you're trying to like implement some sort of resource constraint. You say, I only want like 10 Go routines running at a time. So the way to do that is to kind of model a semaphore using a channel with a backlog. And so what you would do is
you have a channel with the backlog of the number of Go routines you want running. In your inner loop, you just read for work. You attempt to send something to that channel, and if the channel is full, of course, that's going to block. If it's not full, you'll send it, and then go ahead and spawn your Go routine. And then within your Go routine, read from that channel. That means that the work is done, and that opens up a slot in that channel's backlog. So if you have a backlog of 10, that pumping this data in and out of that channel kind of helps constrain the number of concurrent Go routines, and the channel actually handles like the blocking, so it kind of will sort of pace the spawning Go routines. And so that's what this is. And I hate to admit it, but I kind of revisited that talk and this idea, and it blew my mind how simple and this is. And so one of the side effects is that if you have a panic somewhere during the course of like using this pool of the active Go routines, of course, you don't want typically you don't want stuff to panic. I try to avoid panic at all costs. But if you're doing something in that inner loop or in that work that you can't help but to panic, then you only get the backtrace of things that are active. In addition to that, I was always curious about the performance impact. Like, is there actual efficiency to be had from pre-spawning versus spawning Go routines on demand? So what I tried to do is come up with, as you can see in these worker pools, all they do is track the amount of time it took for a message to come into the worker pool handler and then come back out. And so I keep track of that time, and I try to sum them up. And so I did this in like just a regular file, like outside of a test, like outside of the benchmark. And the results were surprising to me because the semaphore model, the data flowed in and out, measurably faster. One of the things I also had to account for is that with the worker pool model, you have to kind of give it time to like sort of spin up the the workers. And so I'd have it spin up, sleep for about 5 seconds, just to be completely sure. And without the sleep, I noticed that that spinning up the Go routines did actually take like a measurable amount of time. But that's irrelevant because I guess theoretically what you do is you spin up the Go routines once.
Yes, one of them is going to be cut.
Yeah, it's constant, it's done ahead of time, and whatever. So after that, while we're sitting here, I was trying to write a benchmark, and it's giving me the weirdest answers. It's giving me the weirdest results. So what this does is I try to come up with a pre-bench, which allows me to implement that sleep. So create our worker pool, sleep for a little bit to kind of let things settle down, and then pump some data into my worker pools and get it back out. And so this is what that benchmark does. And so let's look at the results. Now let me make sure I have something commented out. Yeah. And so another thing I do is I add up the turnaround time. So I send, I wouldn't call it a packet, but I send a message via a channel into my worker pool. I'm sorry. Let's see, how do I do this? So I start my worker pool here. So this is what actually starts a worker pool. This value I increment, and that's the number of actual workers that it will allow at any given time. So that also translates to the number of workers that it will pre-spawn, right? In the traditional model, and that's what this effectively does is it's also the size of our backlog in our channel that controls.
This is a buffer channel.
Yeah. Okay. So this function starts it. This thing is my pre-bench thing. It just sort of slows things down. I usually put a sleep in there or something like that. But right now, I don't care about that because I'm going to run. I don't want to sit here and watch it sleep. And also, this dictates how many jobs I pump through there. So for whatever backlog, I want to just pump that number of jobs through and see how fast they come back. And that's what this does here. So I pump some work in there and I just tag it with the current time. What the actual worker pools do is it sets the duration portion of our work to the current time minus the start time that it read when it received the work. And then just punches that back out through the answer. So it says, basically, so all it does is, I'm just trying to figure out what's the time between sending this message and getting, and the actual worker receiving the message, and then I pass that value back. Perfect. So, that was the weirdest sneeze I've ever heard. So go, I'm sorry if I'm messing with Ralph, he's just, no, you ignored me. Okay, so go test bench. You're splitting? I'm about to benchmark. This is, here it goes. This is it. This is like the.
Okay. Like I was trying to wait as long as
Never
I
gonna
could.
wait, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so traditional worker pools, I'll give you the TLDR. They actually, the total time, at least in this benchmark that I just contrived, is shorter. For some reason, it's able to actually submit more data to the actual worker pool. I don't know why. I blame my crappy benchmark that I wrote. I wrote it under, like in a very short amount of time. But if we actually print out the actual turnaround time, the values of the duration from sending that packet out and getting it, and the actual worker getting it, we'll see a whole different story. So first, the traditional worker pools are all over the place, in the order of like hundreds of well, now it's going to milliseconds. And what I'm finding is that, the actual activation time, we'll call that, for the traditional worker pools actually goes up with the number of worker pools you have. So that is to say, the number of workers you have. So that is to say, the more workers you have, the longer it takes to actually take one and activate it.
More contention of the channel?
What's that again?
More contention of the channel?
I don't think it's contention on the channel. I think it, well, so each worker is blocked listening for a message on message over a channel. I have a feeling that it's that selection process, like which GoRoutine should receive this data. That's just hypothesis that I came up with before we started.
By contention, actually.
What's that again?
That's what I meant by contention. Like.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I agree. So as you can see, it goes up from microseconds. Starts out microseconds, but also the numbers are all over the place, right? It's microseconds, goes to milliseconds as we increase the number of which calls. And then as soon as we go to semaphore, notice that it's very consistent. So no matter how many.
It's always sending to the first one. It's always a one GoRoutine. Yeah.
It's always one GoRoutine that it just starts up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the process of spooling up a GoRoutine is always going to be the same. It's not like it has to. It's not like the runtime has to like select.
If you're doing something latency critical, that's much better. Yeah.
Yes, and so the round trips are way shorter, and I feel like just my benchmark is bad, but this blew my mind. I thought it was really cool, and it completely changed the way I think about doing worker pools. And I highly recommend that you search for Brian Mills' GopherCon 2018 because it's under the radar, one of the best talks of the entire thing. That's all.
Would you mind posting that if you happen to have it on the channel?
You know me, like every time you guys are like, you mind posting that? It never happens. See you.
Take care. Continue again.
It is up on YouTube. You can search for Brian Mills and GopherCon 2018.
Let me just write it down.
So what you're saying is that you've got a buffered pool, and but you're still using that to submit the work through, right?
No, so I'm not actually submitting again before run a GoRoutine. I try to send something to the pool,
Right.
and if the pool is full, to the channel, and if the channel's backlog is full, that'll block, right? And so inside the body of the worker function, once the work is done, it reads from the channel, and that frees up the space.
I think this is, the same technique, a friend, one of my colleagues actually was doing, I think, the same thing. I called it a ticket metaphor. Filled the buffer pool up with tickets. And so now there's a message waiting for the number of buffers, right? But then what he was doing was a handler